Welcome to English 9 Unchanging Values in the VUCA World, featuring the text We Are Not the Virus. Health workers speak to UNICEF about their struggles by Jacques Gimeno, May 19, 2020. Quarter 2, Week 7. I am Mr. Nelpron Sambalod and I'm your teacher for this course. Since this is just continuation of weeks 5 to 8 lessons dealing with unchanging values in the book of world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, we are now on learning task 5. It says here that we need to read a certain article and follow the questions that follow. But before we proceed dealing with that article, let's have the images on this slide. So we have here the latest update on the number of COVID cases in the Philippines. So the total number of cases, it's already 545,000. Recovered, 501,000. And the deaths, 11,495. So in the worldwide scenario, the total cases is 108 million. Recovered, 60.8 million, and the deaths 2.39 million. So, how are these images or data related to the text that we are about to read? So, that is what I would like you to have in mind. Let us see the connection between the images here and the text that we will be reading. So, let us have the next slide. Now, let's read the article. We Are Not the Virus. Health workers speak to UNICEF about their struggles by Jacques Gimeno. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the Philippines in early March, people started looking for answers. In a country that has faced disease outbreaks, the sight of doctors and nurses aiding the sick is comforting to many. It came as a surprise when some people started to turn against frontline health workers shortly after the lockdown in mid-March. Reports of health workers being attacked became news, with many experiencing eviction, ridicule, and harassment despite the public adulation for their heroic sacrifices. Frontline health workers fear for their lives as the risk of stigmatization weighs almost as heavy as their exposure to the virus. We are not the virus. Health workers speak to UNICEF about their struggles. So, if you can recall, in the early days of COVID-19, announcement in the Philippines, there was even a call for the Secretary of Department of Health, Secretary Duque, to step down as the health secretary. Also, there were news talking about health workers, frontliners not being treated fairly or people discriminating them for they thought of being infected by the health workers who have direct contact with the patients of COVID-19. So, in the first part of the article, we have here the clear statement of the health workers telling people that the stigma being attached with them is heavier than the COVID-19 virus itself. Okay, so that's the thought of the first three paragraphs of the given article. It's lonely in the front line. One of the first to provide support as COVID-19 broke, UNICEF responded to requests from the Department of Health and delivered tents to hospitals to help manage the triage and the isolation of suspected cases and to increase the overall capacity for the response. At Santa Ana Hospital in the capital Manila, one of the government-run hospitals that receive a UNICEF tent, the medical staff say they're fortunate because the management provides living quarters and meals. Being in the front line exposes them to immediate risk, so they've come to rely on each other. But when they find themselves alone at times, fear gets to them and hits the hardest during the end of shift. The thought of people thinking that being frontliners makes other people positive on COVID-19 leads to a heavier sadness in the part of the frontliners. So I said earlier that it's heavier than COVID-19 itself. Yes, it is because you have the COVID-19 and you are not being treated fairly by the people around you. So you feel double sadness. You can have the double sadness feeling because these people are having this stigma on you. So it's lonely in the front line. So according to the health workers to the nurses, whenever the shift ends, then that's the time that they are being attacked by thoughts on what life would be for them, knowing that knowing that they are exposed to the virus and they cannot even go home and check on their family members if they are okay. Also, they have the thought of anytime they might be infected by the disease. So they needed to rely heavily on one another. So indeed, it's lonely in the front line, according to the frontliners. So let's have the next slide. We face an internal struggle at the end of the day, says Jose Carganilla, a 32-year-old nurse. What if I get sick? I'm on my own. His colleague and friend Patrick Tan, 31, believes the pandemic makes some of them question why they do what they do. Some of us struggle to accept that we're risking our lives, he says as he weighs his next words. We're working with one foot in the grave. Sanita Uy Bistal, a laboratory scientist, praises her colleagues in the front line, but she sometimes wishes they could get support too. People always see doctors and nurses. They don't see the lab scientists. Behind all this, Sanita says, we handle the specimen for testing, which exposes us to a greater risk. It's lonely in the front line. So just like what I mentioned in the previous slides, at the end of their shift, the frontliners were having the thoughts of what if they get sick, how they can manage it, knowing that their family members cannot take care of them. Here we have Carganilla, a 32-year-old nurse who's frequently asking himself, what if I get sick? I'm on my own. Also, we have Patrick Tan, who's thinking of who's thinking of the struggle on accepting that they're risking their lives. Also, he said that what? They're working with one foot in the grave. And we have here Sanita Oybistal, a laboratory scientist who's feeling feeling deprived, who's feeling deprived of the thought that only the doctors and nurses being recognized by people and neglecting the laboratory scientists. So indeed, those thoughts make them feel lonely as frontliners. Okay, so you have there the UNICEF. Luckily, you have the UNICEF that is extending all the support to the Philippine government, particularly to the Department of Health when it comes to fighting COVID-19. So let's have the next slide. Finding the balance. With the number of cases increasing in the Philippines every day, DOH says some 15,000 additional medical personnel are needed. Recently, the government enacted the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, a law improving support to health workers. The city of Manila followed suit with an ordinance prohibiting discrimination against health workers. Jose is thrilled about these developments, but cautions that he and his colleagues may be reaching the tipping point, physically and mentally. It's not if, but when we get sick, when I do, I hope I have enough strength to fight for my own life, Jose says. Before we read the article, I presented to you images of the updates regarding the number of cases in the Philippines and even in the worldwide scenario. So, what's the connection of those images as we go on reading the text? So we have here finding the balance. So of course, knowing the number of cases of COVID-19 in the country, the Department of Health, which is the direct agency of the government that deals with the pandemic because it's the health department, thinks of ways on how to combat COVID-19, especially when it comes to the number of medical workers that are needed or personnel needed to deal with COVID-19. So that is in the case of the Department of Health, the finding the balance. But among the frontliners, we have here the finding the balance in the sense that they are they are trying to convince themselves that manage they can manage working as frontliners, that they can have the enough strength for them to proceed on their passion or on their work as frontliners, and also trying to convince themselves even even they get ill of COVID-19, then they hope that they will have the strength for them to fight for their own lives. So that's the finding the balance. Okay, so let's have the continuation of the text. For love of fellow man and family. When asked why they continue to work despite the risk, they told UNICEF the same thing. They're serving in very trying times, but every patient they send home alive and well far outweighs the negativity. Nursing isn't just a profession, it's a calling, Patrick says. My purpose is to help people and my colleagues. Jose, Sanita, and Sarah have been away from home since March. Their families worry about the attacks and the news of over 1,000 medical personnel sick with COVID-19. I'm very happy when a patient gets well. I tell them to hold their family close, something I can't do right now, Jose says, apologizing for suddenly breaking into tears. For love of fellow men and family. When the frontliners were asked by UNICEF on why they continue to work, the following answers were given. Nursing isn't just a profession, it's a calling. My purpose is to help people and my colleagues. That's according to Patrick. While according to Jose, I'm very happy when a patient gets well. I tell them to hold their family close, something I can't do right now. And he broke to tears. So love for fellow men and family, that they are really doing their work just like what they pledged when they had their oath taking, to serve, to extend help to the sick, and provide cure for the sick. So in return, as what I attach in the slide, you have the building painted with the image of a doctor who's having the mask of Darna. So you have there an image of a frontliner wearing the mask of Darna, because the people in return acknowledge also the love extended to the extended by the frontliners to their fellow man, with the greatest honor they can give through that one, that painted building, and other ways of recognizing their effort. Okay, so you have the thanks to our frontliners. Okay, so do not worry, for your love for fellow men and family is highly recognized also by the people around. Okay, so let's have the last part. UNICEF has been supporting the government of the Philippines in its COVID-19 response. To date, it has procured 72,000 sets of PPEs, 64 multipurpose tents, and 200 mobile hand washing facilities to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, BARM. UNICEF has also been providing technical assistance to the government in risk communication and community engagement, and in various training activities for the COVID-19 essential workforce, such as infection prevention and control training for community health workers, reaching 2,800 and 790 health workers and sanitary engineers and inspectors. This conclusion part of the text tells us how UNICEF keeps on extending its help to the country, to the Philippine government. So indeed, UNICEF there has an unchanging values in the VUCA world. So the set of values that the organization uh, promulgated is still being manifested by them as they continuously extend help to countries that are in need of help. So that would be all for the text. We are not the virus. After reading and explaining the content of the article, let us now proceed on answering the following questions. Number one, what does the article say about the medical frontliner situation in the country? So the article says that the medical frontliners in the country is not treated fairly at first or during the first quarter of COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines, in the sense that they were discriminated. Also, they were stigmatized by the people, thinking that they are instrument on spreading the virus, that getting near them will make them infected by COVID-19. But also, we can say that as days pass by, the situation of the medical frontliners in the country have been changed from unacceptable ones to acceptable ones, in the sense that there were even actions made by the government. One of them is the promulgation of the Bayanihan Heal as One Act, which highlights the care, that the treatment that should be given to the frontliners, particularly medical frontliners. Number two, how can the situation influence the Filipino medical frontliners? The situation at first challenged the minds, the heart, and soul of the Filipino medical frontliners, especially when they were stigmatized by people. But as we have the Bayanihan Heal as One Act law, it it helps in the motivation of the Filipino medical frontliners. Okay? For numbers 3 and 4, I would like you to read again the text and deal with it in your Google Classroom. Look for the Google Form link, for I would like you to provide your very own answers dealing with those questions. Let's have number 5. Number 5, based on the article, trace the development of your thinking. Use the graphic organizer to jot down your initial and final perspectives concerning other people's circumstances. So I have here my answers for the said activity, but of course, I would love to hear from you. So you deal with this activity in your Google Classroom. So let's have my answers. Observing others' circumstances. Initial. My initial perspective about the medical frontliners, particularly the nurses, is that they are like Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lump, who are very much willing to check on the health status of patients, and they do have unchanging values despite the VUCA world by reminding themselves of the Nightingale's pledge. Moreover, they do serve as light of inspiration for the sick to be healed. And what is my final perspective? After reading the text, my perspective about the nurses have changed. I realized that though they have unchanging values despite the book of world, their values associated with their love for their profession even intensified, in the sense that they are very much willing to risk their life for their fellow men, and they do have superb nationalism. Therefore, the nurses as well as other frontliners do deserve the love, respect, admiration, and recognition of the society. Let us also serve as light of inspiration for our frontliners by joining the cooperative undertaking, Bayanihan, on eliminating COVID-19. So that would be all for number 5. Thank you. I hope that you have learned a lot from our week's lesson. Have a good day and God bless.